Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and today I finally want to share my tier list of all the heroes currently in Marvel Rivals for Season 0. And I waited a little bit longer than a lot of people for several reasons. First and foremost, I looked at a lot of the data from win rates, pick rates, as well as ban rates. I also looked at gameplay from tournaments as well as high ranked, such as one above all ranked characters and players. And then I also wanted to give it a chance to see how the game evolved and people got to learn all of the different characters and maximize their kits, because initially, while some characters felt very strong right away, they either fell off or they got even better as people learned how to play them correctly. And so, jumping right in, we're going to start with one of my more disappointing characters, Captain America, who I put at C. The reason he's C tier, in my opinion, is because he doesn't do anything as well as a lot of the other vanguards in the game. Doesn't block as efficiently, doesn't do as much damage as someone like Thor, and so because of that, he's a jack of all trades, but he doesn't do any of them. And so while he can be potentially good in a team up with Thor, that combination is not super effective in the game right now. And so he is just a bit lacking. I do think there are several ways where he can be really good in the future. His deflect of like Iron Man's ult is hilarious and can be a lot of fun, but ultimately it's not good enough as it stands, and he is one of the worst vanguards in the game, unfortunately. A good one could probably do some fun things with him, but ultimately, on average, he's not going to be all that great. Then we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man, in the right hands, can be absolutely S tier. However, he can also be D tier more often than not, and the reason for that is Spider-Man is a five-star difficulty character for a reason. His kit is incredibly hard to master, and as you get to higher levels, if you haven't mastered his kit, he is going to struggle. You can absolutely annihilate quick play lobbies with a good Spider-Man, or a decent Spider-Man even, as you are diving the backline, jumping in and out, swinging to everybody. But once you get to players who are really good, then he is so easy to counter if you don't understand how to maximize his potential. And so because of that, he really struggles. There's no other character who I will look at when they insta-lock on my team, and I'm just like, oh, this could be a very long game. This is going to be a loss. Like Spider-Man, because of how many of them will be insta-locked and just will underperform, not get a lot of picks, not really be able to get out of danger and find heals or get healing themselves because they're never in sight of the strategist. So Spider-Man is B tier. Again, at full potential is incredibly good, but for the majority of players is not, and I wouldn't recommend using them because there's so many other really powerful, much easier to use characters in the game right now. Then we've got Loki. Loki's another character who I feel like as time has gone on, his kit has really been learned to be maximized in a way that is significantly better than it was initially. And I think a lot of people thought he was terrible at first, but I think he's A tier. And my reasoning for that is threefold. First off, you have his clones. And as people learned to position his clones in a way that they can see most of your teammates and you can see most of the enemies, you're going to do more damage and also heal your teammates more. And it's not even by a little bit, it's significant. So a good Loki will constantly be healing huge amounts of damage. Then you also have his invulnerability, which can completely cancel out certain ultimates. And because of that, you can not only use it yourself, but you can save your teammates by putting a clone next to your teammate and then popping the invulnerability and allowing them to survive huge chunks of damage, which is absolutely insane. Third, this character really shines when you know how to use other ultimates as well. Sometimes it's easy. If you have a Luna Snow or Mantis on one of the teams, you can just take their ults and then you have a free one of those anytime you want for his ultimate. Or you can use it offensively and maybe you're using a StarLord ultimate and doing insane damage, getting a bunch of kills. But if you're not good with it, if you pick an ultimate that you don't really understand how to use, now he's not going to get the same value as he would otherwise. And so as we get to the highest ends, you're starting to see with Luna, Snow, and Mantis getting banned quite often, he is rising up the usage charts, and I think he is incredibly good if you have an understanding on his kit. Same thing with the Hulk, but to a different degree. I think Hulk is going to be A tier. And now, I say this in that he is one of those characters that is incredibly good in the right hands. He has the highest win rate in the game in competitive, but he has a lower pick rate, meaning the people who are comfortable and confident in picking him almost always do very well. The people who don't just don't pick him. And so that's why where you have a Doctor Strange or Magneto or a Groot who are significantly easier to use, they might not be as good. They don't have the same skill ceiling. Maybe Doctor Strange does, but that's about it as far as Hulk goes. But because not everyone is going to pick him, I'd knock him down just a little bit because he has an incredibly useful kit. But if you see his usage rate start to rise and a lot of people who don't understand how to use Hulk start picking him, his win rate is going to drop dramatically, in my opinion. And that's why he's not as good as he might seem with that super high win rate. Because, again, it takes the right player using him in order to maximize what he does. I will say the amount of damage he can take if he launches into the enemies, then he has his bubble shield, then he can use his ultimate, then he'll have his bubble back again, and it's just insane. He can just tank more damage than I think than any other character in the game in that short of span. Then we have Neymar. I think Neymar is incredibly underrated, and I'm going to put him also in A tier. We're going to go through some of the duelists who are on a similar level. They do similar things, but in different ways. And so, starting off as Neymar, Luna Snow is in a lot of teams, and so he gets the benefit of that team up, which is absolutely insane. You have him just doing a lot of damage and getting a lot of picks that you just don't really see when you're in the middle of the game. There are folks who will be like, oh, well, I didn't even know when Neymar was in this game, and all of a sudden he's MVP. The reason for that is you're just doing damage over time, which oftentimes can be healed pretty easily, but when you get somebody low, it's very easy to get those picks with Neymar because of his tridents and everything that you're throwing. And plus, you'll have potentially 3 turrets on the field at a given time. It's actually insane. And so I think he's one that, especially against certain team compositions, can perform incredibly well. And on certain maps, certain modes, etc. There are times where he won't shine, but I think he is incredibly useful. And not only that, but he can play against or with any play style, essentially, which makes him very, very valuable. But on the same level, and I think slightly better, is going to be Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is insanely good. Benefits from Rocket's team up. Like I said, Rocket's another one like Loki that with Luna and Mantis often getting banned will pop up into high ranks pretty often. And ultimately, if you're hitting your shots with him, he's insane. If you use his skill cooldowns properly, he's insane. His ultimate, everyone knows, again, can be quite infuriating to play against. But I do think that he's not quite as good as some of the other characters on this list, and that's why I'm going to drop him down, not into S tier, but to A tier. I do think he's very, very good. His damage output is insane, and his kit is very fun. If you learn how to use his grapple and steal tanks and everything, he can be extremely, very awesome to use. And so, ultimately, I think he's very, very good. And, he's right there in the A tier. Then we have Mantis. This is our first S tier of the list. She is probably the best strategist in the game. She does insane damage herself. She can sleep enemies. Her ultimate is bananas, and ultimately she is just probably the most banned character that besides Hela in the game too. Insanely good, and ultimately, I just think she is extremely strong right now. She does benefit from the seasonal bonus, so that's why we'll see what happens with season 1, and she gets less healing. But for now, she has just unbelievable potential in the right hands. I will say, if you're climbing, using her can be very difficult until you kind of understand, until you're able to really hit your shots consistently and do the damage and also heal your teammates. Learn to maximize her damage boost versus her healing and all that kind of good stuff. Her kit is a little bit more complicated, but once you get it down, she is absolutely insane. Psylock. Psylock is another one of those I'm actually going to put into A tier. High A tier. I think she's better than Winter Soldier or Namor, but she's not quite S tier like some of the others on the list, and so that's why she drops down just a little bit. I will say her burst potential for single targets, especially as you're flanking, is absolutely insane. She is very good. Her ultimate is extremely good if you use it properly. One of the downsides of her ultimate is it distributes the damage amongst all the enemies caught within it, so you don't often want to use it against 4 or 5 enemies unless they're all low already. But you're better off using it against like 2 enemies, trying to get those kills and secure them, and then getting out of dodge with your invisibility and your dash as well. But I think she's very good. And honestly, any of the A tier duelists are your best picks when you're higher rank competitive, especially if Hela or Hawkeye or are banned. That follows suit with Moon Knight as well. I think I considered putting him in high B. And the only reason I put him lower is because he is counterable. But I've also seen some gameplay from the highest end. And if you are able to instantly follow his onks with your attacks, you can do wild burst damage before the enemy can shoot the onk at all. Plus, requiring them to turn and find the onk, especially if you put it in an off location, is very annoying. And so for that, his ultimate struggles a little bit in comparison with some of the others. I just think he is very, very good and gets a lot of value from various parts of his kit. He can burst enemies down. If you're hitting your shots, even without the onk, you can do some pretty decent damage. So ultimately, I think he belongs there in the A tier. Then we have Thor. Thor is interesting because I think he's like low A, high B kind of area. I'm going to put him in B for this. And my reasoning is he does really good damage. He's got decent survivability, but he almost is reliant on the right team comp. You almost need a shield tank with him in order to be successful. As an off tank, I think he's incredibly good. I do think, like I said, his damage can be pretty wild. If you play for picks, you could even play him as almost like a flank tank instead of like a dive tank, you know? But if you're in the right team, if you're in a brawl team, he could be insane. That being said, I do think his kit is lacking just a little bit compared to some of the other tanks currently, and he doesn't have the skill ceiling of somebody like Hulk does. So that's why he's going to drop down just a little bit and not be quite as valuable as other picks. Then we've got Luna Snow. She is the second S tier strategist on this list. Incredibly good. And I think is much easier to use than Mantis. She's one that pretty much anybody can pick up. Not quite as easy as Cloak and Dagger, but otherwise is super useful in basically any team. Her ultimate's insane. She's got the freeze to get away from or eliminate flanking enemies, diving enemies, anyone who's getting in your face. So I like her kit the most out of all the healers personally, and I think she's very good overall and gets banned a lot for that reason. Her ultimate is obviously very insane. Then we have Venom. Venom is low B, high C. This is where you almost need like mid ranks because I think Venom is worse than Thor, but also better than Captain America. And the reason for that is as you get higher in the ranks and you start to play against like characters who can counter dives, especially solo divers specifically. If you find a really good team that has SpiderMan and Venom, they could terrorize a backline. But a Venom alone can get countered pretty easily, especially if you have a Mantis or a Luna Snow or somebody like that, or you hold one of your other DPS or tanks or whatever, DPS or Duelist or Vanguard back in order to protect your backline. And so while his diving can be good, far too often we see it where he's diving in and then getting picked off and your team isn't able to heal him or protect him, and it's kind of a waste and you're just getting the enemy team is essentially farming ults at that point. So I wish he was higher. I think his skill ceiling is pretty decent once you kind of maximize what he can do. But ultimately, I think he does struggle in certain ways and just doesn't match up with some of the other Vanguards in the game as it currently stands. Then we have Iron Man. Iron Man is another B tier character. And he is one that I think as the game evolves will be interesting to watch. And I say that because of two reasons. One, he is currently the best way to get rid of a Luna Snow or a Mantis ult. They are pretty much indestructible otherwise, and he is able to instantly delete them with his ultimate. He also gets boosted by a lot. He would be A tier if he was in a team with Hulk, because that Gamma Charge does insane damage. It is a delete button for any squishy character in the game. And so because of that, if we see more Hulks in the higher end, we might see more Iron Mans who do damage, get those picks, also are there to counter a Mantis or a Luna Snow ult. And if you're a decent flyer, can navigate the area pretty well. You're still likely to get picked off by either a Mantis or more likely a Hela or Hawkeye, but if they're banned, now all of a sudden you're way more valuable because as you learn to fly, you're much harder to hit and you're able to evade all that damage. So again, he is one that I'll definitely keep an eye on. Could rise up to A, could drop to C depending on how the meta and the characters evolve over time. Then we've got Wolverine. Wolverine's another one of those characters. I think I love Wolverine, but I think I want to put him in C. And I want to put him higher because a really good Wolverine is a game changer, and I do think people have been using him wrong. When he's going up against Shieldy, like if you run up against a team that's running 3 tanks, you would want Wolverine because he does higher damage if the enemy has a higher health pool. So he is essentially a tank buster. The problem is his kit doesn't necessarily always allow him to survive long enough if you don't know how to use them. So while you can flank and go after a strategist, oftentimes a Mantis or Luna Snow or one of those other strategists is going to burst you down or get rid of you. Whereas your goal should be either to bust out a tank and try to get them eliminated as quickly as possible, or kidnap one of them, bring them back to your team, and then you can do a bunch of damage without them getting healed. Now, this is easier said than done, especially at the higher ranks, but ultimately I think he is one that I'll keep my eye on. I think he could be very good eventually, but as of right now, he does struggle because I don't think he has the survivability to fill the role that he wants to fill as much as he needs to be. So at the highest end, there are some absolutely insane Wolverines, though, who can perform very, very well. Next up, we have Rocket. Rocket is right here in A, in my opinion, and my opinion on him has changed quite a bit as I've been watching some of the high rank play. I initially thought that we would see a lot more Cloak and Dagger after Mantis and Luna Snow started getting banned, but instead it's mostly Loki and Rocket Raccoon. And I think the reason for that is a couple fold. One, if you have a Punisher or a Winter Soldier on your team, then Rocket gives them a huge benefit with their team up. He also is extremely good at either just focusing heal botting, mixing in healing and damage, or bursting enemies who are out of position as well. His primary fire does a lot more damage than I think people gives it credit for if you're hitting your shots consistently. I've seen some really good Rocket players eliminate enemies super fast, so I think that's very important to keep in mind. And ultimately, his revive is incredibly clutch. I think the revives in this game are unironically game changers, and they can do insane things. And so because of that, I do feel like he gets more value because of that revive that can use on a 40 some odd second cooldown that can be very, very important for having a team fight swing in your favor. Then we have Squirrel Girl. I'm going to put her in the B. And the reason I don't have her lower is because with the current setup of these shield tank, just two teams marching forward at each other, trying to do as much damage, I think she performs really well there. You can use her ability to stun enemies. You can just send in damage consistently from afar where you're in a safe spot. If you don't have a Hela or Hawkeye to worry about too, she performs pretty decently overall. And I think even though her kit is pretty simple, she can do nice damage and just whittle enemies down from a distance pretty easily. Then we have Hela. She is our next S tier character, probably the best in the game, and ultimately insane. She gets banned all the time in high ranks of competitive and in tournament play because of how good she is, and she's pretty fairly easy to use. I'll be very curious to see how she performs once she doesn't have the seasonal bonus anymore, and hopefully that knocks her down to be good, maybe A tier, but we'll have to wait and see. If she's still as good as she is now, she's a nightmare, and her ultimate is insane too. So yeah, lots of reasons to have her as the #1 character in the game, to be honest. Then we have Magic. Magic is very good in the right hands, but very bad in the wrong ones. I've said that quite a bit in this video, but that seems to be a consistent trend. Too often, Magic players get stuck behind enemy lines, and they think they're going to be invulnerable because of how much damage they're doing. But you can't out-heal damage from multiple characters as you're teleporting in and out of danger. And so because of that, too often, Magic gets caught out of position. However, there are players towards the top end who have played a lot of Magic to climb, so she is good for that. If you are playing against a team that's either out of position or you're able to take advantage of her essentially one-shot combinations, then she can be very, very good. But when you're playing against the best teams and that becomes much harder, she falls off a little bit, and you're more likely to see somebody switch to like a Psylock, for example, who is just more consistent with that same almost flanking style of gameplay. Now we have the menace that everybody hated initially, and I think is still fine, Iron Fist. Iron Fist has that incredible burst damage that can eliminate strategists very, very quickly. However, I also think he is one of those characters that dominates pubs, pub stopping legend, but doesn't really perform once you get to higher ranks. And so because of that, is in an interesting situation where you'll have Iron Fist mains who are in bronze or silver absolutely dominating, everybody hates him, and then you proceed forward and he becomes not useless, but far less usable. If used correctly, he can be a blast. Dive in, get some kills, jump off. You don't need to find a health pack because he can heal himself. All that makes him very, very valuable at times, especially if you're able to block a bunch of damage before you go in for the kills. I think he can be very, very good. But ultimately, he is one that falls off pretty hard as you get to the higher ranks. And so because of that, he struggles just a little bit. Then I'm going to talk about Magneto next. Magneto is another A tier for me. I think he can be very, very good. But ultimately, if Scarlet Witch was better, he would be better. I think Scarlet Witch is a C tier character, and so because of that, Magneto suffers. And the reason for that is he is a slightly worse shielder than Doctor Strange, especially if you don't use him properly and you're not able to shield your teammates with his bubble. But he also is doesn't do as much damage as somebody like Thor. And his ultimate has to be used properly. So if you didn't know, his ultimate absorbs damage and does more damage if you're able to absorb more. So you want to be using it almost to counter like an Iron Man ult or something like that in order to dish out more damage. But ultimately, his attacks are okay. But with Scarlet Witch, they are incredibly strong. And so because of that, if she was powerful, he would be S tier. However, because she is not, he drops down quite a bit. And that's really the problem that he has right now. Now, Scarlet Witch is one that was absolutely insane when the game first dropped and is really another pub stomping type of character. She can really succeed against lobbies that aren't the highest skill. But she falls off quite a bit for several reasons. One, it feels almost like her kit is a worse version of Cloak and Dagger at times. Her ultimate can be comboed to great effect, like if you're using a Doctor Strange portal or if you're using a Jeff ult or something like that. But by itself, it's easily counterable, especially if players turn and shoot her or if you're able to CC her out of it. I have done that with Penny Parker numerous times, and I've enjoyed every single one of them. So she is definitely a character who falls off really, really hard. And while she is fun, she's got an interesting kit. I think ultimately her struggles really hurt Magneto the most from him being like living up to his max potential, but also she just isn't a character that's going to shine at this particular time in a way that really allows her to climb up the highest ranks in the game. Then we have StarLord. I'm going to put StarLord in with these other A-tier duelists, and my reasoning for that is because he is another one that in the right hands can be excellent and is basically interchangeable. If you are really good with Neymar, then stick with Neymar. Same thing with Moon Knight or Winter Soldier. But if you're not good with them, they're not going to perform really well regardless. StarLord is another one who's like that, but is a bit higher risk reward and really struggles with certain team compositions. A double shield tank, a shield vanguard that has a bunch of healing and is clumped up together, that's not really where StarLord is going to shine. He needs the enemies to be separated so he can get picks. He's almost better at times waiting for enemy flankers in order to take them out before then going around and trying to pick off a strategist who's too far back or away from his teammates. And he has some really awesome parts of his kit. His dodge reloads his guns, also gives him iframes so he can essentially dodge ultimates and stuff if you time it correctly, although that can be very, very difficult. And his ultimate itself is insane. However, again, if you are running into a team comp that's very much clustered up, you can get picked off time and time again. He also is a little bit hurt by the fact that Adam Warlock isn't that much better, because if he had that Cocoon ability where he's able to revive consistently, because there's always an Adam Warlock on your team, now he really performs well. Unfortunately, Adam Warlock, in my opinion, is B tier. Not terrible, not bad, but not great either. He is a character who, his burst damage can be insane with his charged attack. He can full res the team, but if that's used incorrectly, can absolutely ruin a fight. And why that is because your teammates are revived at half health, and then if you don't have healing available, they get deleted. Especially if you put the ultimate in a position to where you're right in the middle of the fight. You can put your ultimate away from the fight and then move towards it, and the reses go based on where the Adam Warlock is, not where you put the revive. So you can put the revive spot in a safe place, push into the fight, start reviving your teammates, and then they can heal up or find a health pack or whatever the case may be before getting into that fight. That being said, he struggles compared to a lot of the other healers in the game, like Mantis, Luna Snow, and even, in my opinion, Loki and Rocket. And so that's why he's just a bit down on the list. His cooldowns can be frustrating to juggle if you don't know how to use them properly. Black Panther, another one right here in this list. A good Black Panther is an absolute menace. However, there are a lot of not good Black Panthers, and the difference between him and Spider-Man is that more often than not, you're going to see Black Panthers getting picks if they are used correctly. Whereas Spider-Man can do things right and still struggle to get a pick. And so that's really, I think, the difference. Plus, the team-wide combinations that you can do with Black Panther are absolutely insane, and there are players at the highest rank who are maining Black Panthers and performing really well. Now, again, much like StarLord, if you have players who are grouped up too much, you can get picked off pretty easily. However, he's a more high-risk, high-reward character, just like StarLord as well, compared to like a Winter Soldier, or Neymar, or Moon Knight as well. Groot. I think I'm going to put Groot in S tier. I'm not going to, this is a tough one for me because it might be high A, but I think he's better than Hulk, and he might be the second best tank in the game, in my personal opinion. Excellent damage. His walls, when you learn to use them, are insane. He does more damage around his walls. He has an AoE attack that does very well. His ultimate is very good as well. He's just so well-rounded as a tank, and his main attacks do more damage than I think most people believe they do. So, and they have more range than that as well. They go a lot farther than I think people expect. So ultimately, he's very, very good. I think he is one of those characters who can shine in a lot of different team compositions, and ultimately, if Doctor Strange is getting banned, he would be my go-to. Cloak and Dagger is B, and she was my favorite strategist early on in the game, but I think she just falls off as you get to higher ranks. Early on, in my opinion, she's likely one of the best characters you can use to climb from bronze to gold and even plat. And the reason for that, you don't have to have good aim. Her attacks as Dagger auto lock on, which is very, very nice. Not only to do damage, but also to heal allies. Once you learn her kit even a little bit, she can be very good. Her cloak abilities are very handy. However, they work better if you have a team that's aware of when you're using them. For example, her invulnerability, if an ally attacks while they're within it, they lose that protection. So you want to use it to counter ults, but your teammates have to be aware enough not to get out of the cloak, essentially. Same thing with her wall that blinds. If you use that, and the enemies, you want your allies to be shooting whatever enemy you hit with it, because they take more damage, the enemy does, when they are hit by that. So that's very, very important. Then we have Hawkeye. He is S tier for me. Again, there's a reason he's so often picked. He's the second best duelist right behind Hela, and it's just absolutely insane. His one-shot potential is bananas. Any character with a one-shot abilities is going to be wild. Bad Hawkeyes are still doing heavy chunk damage to, especially to tanks with those big hitboxes. It's kind of crazy. So I think he is going to be very, very good. We'll see what happens when he loses his Xeno Zone bonus. His ultimate is insane too. Then we have Storm. She is D tier, unfortunately. I think her boost to allies is not enough to offset her lack of damage that she does herself. You could set up some interesting team comps with her and some combinations, I think, that work really well, but ultimately she just is underperforming, and she's one that I think either needs a buff or some other way to bring her up on the same level as some of the other characters in the game. Then we have Punisher. Punisher, I think, is right here in A. Just like with these other duelists, he is one, he's very easy to use, very powerful. If you're running into a double shield tank enemy comp, he can absolutely shred them, and especially if the enemy doesn't take him out, hop in his turret. His turret can also make him invulnerable to CC, so a lot of those abilities that you'll see will not affect him in his turret, like you can't get eaten by Jeff or anything like that either. So any of these duelists right here are good picks if you are decent with them, and ultimately Punisher is right there as well. I think his smoke is most underutilized in his kit, but his ultimate is absolutely insane. Doctor Strange, S tier, probably the best Vanguard in the game. I think most people would understand that. People don't use his TPs often enough. His portals are insane, and you need to be using them to get advantage on different parts of the map. Everyone wants to use them for fun clips, which is fine, but if you're playing competitive, you should be using them to flank and hit different areas, set up your allies to do a bunch of damage, burst an enemy healer down through a TP, and just catch them unawares. Penny Parker, I'm going to put her in B tier. I know a lot of people say she's a bait character. I think she's better than people give her credit for, especially in certain situations where choke points, certain maps, all that kind of good stuff. She can be incredibly good, especially if you have a shield tank as well. She can be the more damage focused tank on the squad. It's just a problem at highest ranks because she can get burst down quite a bit and absolutely destroyed by enemy teams. Then we have Black Widow. She is the worst character in the game as it stands right now, in my opinion. And that's unfortunate. Everyone thought she was going to be wildly OP when she was first introduced as a sniper character, but with the seasonal bonus, and if she is able to maybe not even one shot, but get close, or like, I don't know what to do to fix her kit. I've seen some people use her in interesting ways, but there's just other characters who are better at what you would want to use her for, and ultimately she just doesn't shine anyway. And finally, everyone's favorite menace, Jeff the Landshark, S tier, right? No. He is C tier. Probably the worst strategist in the game for higher ranks specifically. His healing is super easy for a lot of people. He is able to get out of danger with some of his different abilities. You can dive with him. There's a lot to like about his kit, but ultimately he doesn't do as much as every other strategist in the game, so he falls down by quite a bit. And that's going to be my tier list. I explained a lot of it. Let me know what you guys agree or disagree with in the comments down below. Like the video, as always. Comment. My name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of disagreements. I always get them when I do a tier list, but this is my thoughts, and I'm sure it'll change once Season 1 drops. Anyway, my name is Jopa. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.